Okay.
Yeah. So, Aoife and Ben, thanks a million for sitting down and having a chat. Obviously, the museum and the port, we're delighted to have you both as the winners of the first port short. You might just tell me a little bit about Bowsie and about the Chancellor's Guide to Dublin.
Yeah. So Bow's workshop is mainly me and Aoife, so all the time we're here, and sometimes we'll get other people in. Like for this, we had in an animator and voice people and things like that. But it's mainly the two of us, and we work mainly in art department in films and making our own things. So like kind of we'll do animation and we'll do like miniatures and effects and different things, and but like then we make our own things. We'll often use animation and different aspects of that in the filmmaking kind of process. So we kind of mixed media kind of thing.
Yeah, because we both did model making in college, so that's, I suppose, our background in a way is just making things. So whenever we're making a film, we kind of have that at our disposal, that we can make all the miniatures and design characters, and then doing effects work and makeup as well. We have all of that, those skills, so we can kind of do it for ourselves. So yeah, all of our films are kind of heavy on
Stuff that
making
we can make.
things. Yeah,
So we don't
basically, yeah.
No, it's wonderful. And then, like, when you saw the Port Short competition advertised originally, you know, what motivated you to actually apply? What about it as a competition?
Well, I suppose we're both quite into history, so that was one thing that attracted us to it.
I suppose the scale of the project suited us. We'd kind of just done a short film, and it's kind of like it was manageable within like our scale of the way we do things, and kind of suited the way that we work.
Yeah. And we just moved to a new studio, so by doing animation, it kind of suited the space that we have at the minute. So that was part of it as well. But yeah, just kind of the chance to tell the history of Dublin seemed like a nice project.
Yeah, I actually the short that you're talking about that you did prior to this, I remember seeing it and thinking it was really quite beautiful. And I think obviously the fact that the museum focuses on these ideas of history, hospitality, and humour, it's lovely to see that it was the history that actually kind of put it onto your radar as a competition. And like, you know, I know it was a while ago now, but do you have any memories about how you actually started looking at the competition brief and went about actually kind of creating an application and a project idea from that?
It was the first one we had. We went to and there was a talk in Dublin Port itself, and we kind of like a tour around.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I don't think we had an idea before that. And I think once we went through that, we got a grasp of what it was. Basically, just like, cause even like you kind of just like the port's just always kind of there, and you kind of go, oh, and then you realize it's linked to everything. So like I thought like we actually got the idea afterwards. We weren't sure as what it was. Yeah. Beforehand, we just kind of went to see.
Yeah, because we just went to suss what it was all about, and then I think the tour of the port was really helpful because you just don't really appreciate how important it is. I think, you know, it can take for granted that it's there, and you don't really think too much about it, that, you know, it's a port city that's built all around that. So that was helpful as well. And then the idea came with the chimneys in Rings End, because they're always there, you know, and they're kind of like a iconic thing in Dublin. So just taking those as characters kind of seemed like a good way to tell the story, because they're kind of looking out over the port and the whole city. And just having those two characters having a conversation kind of allowed us to jump through time and through different events and kind of jump back and forth a bit. So it's a bit more conversational instead of writing a linear history of Dublin, I think, which would have been quite difficult.
Actually, that's an interesting question for you, and I don't know if I've ever asked you before. Like, obviously Dublin, we have such a rich history, and it's such a complicated, long-standing story. Like, how did you choose which events to include, or how to actually pare down quite a large narrative?
it was kind of hard because the
Yeah.
things that I found worked better visually were things that were just kind of more just little bits of little bits of information, and then there was other sections of history that I was kind of like, how do you deal with this? And it was kind of it was harder. So it kind of it found itself. I'd like just even in certain aspects, like 'cause I think even it was a conversation that we had with the Little Museum where I think maybe Trevor mentioned something about all the different people that they wanted on Nelson's pillar.
Yeah.
And then we put that in, and that worked really well. And that
Yeah.
was just like, even though it was kind of like, it just kind of like as a visual thing as well, it kind of worked. It worked nicely, and it kind of told something. But then other bits were, I suppose, because we had a lot of stuff where we were going through a lot of stuff with maps, but that kind of got a bit kind of boring, I think. So we kind of cut that down to very quick, kind of snappy bits, and so it's kind of
Because I think the part with Nelson's pillar, because I think Trevor mentioned as well that it was called Half Nelson, and I think that helped set the tone for the film because it's kind of a mixture of humor and history that you do in the museum as well. Do you know, it has the same character to it. So then it was like, once we had that scene, I think that was the first scene we went, oh yeah, this is, we've kind of hit on what we're doing, and then we could build it out from there.
And I think even going to the museum was helpful as well, because that kind of gave us an idea of the tone, which was, I suppose you're talking to people who might have lived in Dublin their whole life, or someone who's just arrived in Dublin. And so like, whatever you're saying to them has to be as interesting, either like to both people. So it's kind of like little bits of information for somebody who doesn't know anything, or somebody who's lived here their whole life, kind of point something out to them that they might not have noticed.
And I think that is kind of one of the interesting challenges that museums like ourselves do face when you're dealing with guests who are tourists on holidays who are arriving in the city for the first time versus someone who's lived here for many years and has called it home. But I'm glad to hear that the trip to the port was useful. I think obviously the nature of the very strange year that 2020 is, I don't think we're going to be able to do a tour of the port this year in the way we normally would, but we are planning to do an online Zoom based tour, which is I think the platform that most of our lives have moved on to in the last couple of months. And I guess then, so you touched on the value of going on the tour in terms of kind of considering this idea of the port of Dublin as a port river city. Like, looking back on the experience now, would you have any advice that you would offer someone who was considering applying for the competition this year?
Go with, because I feel like maybe people might try and shoehorn an old idea into something like this, but it is definitely its own thing.
Yeah.
Like it's I'd say like the closest thing to is almost like walking around Dublin and just pointing at things of interest, going, look at that over there. Like, because you can't really, in the short amount of time, you don't really have much, you don't have the time to actually go into anything in depth. But you can just point things out, and then people in their own time can look into those things further. But like just things of interest. So it's kind of, that's, I suppose, just find things that you find interesting that you would point out, and then maybe kind of construct it around some kind of narrative, which is exactly what we did, which was we just got two kind of people to have a conversation, so we could basically just jump from kind of topic to topic without any cohesive kind of line, really.
Yeah, and I think maybe one thing to think about would be the scale of it, because we were going the whole history of all of Dublin, and then you're like, in 7 minutes, how is this even possible? So just, maybe just pick one aspect. Maybe you can bring other parts in, but if you just have one kind of core part of history you're focusing on, maybe that would be helpful. Because it can be a bit overwhelming as well, and you're trying to cram everything in, and it's a bit of a mess, when you're just looking at all of history.
Yeah, because we had a few false starts where we kind of started making it, and it got a bit noisy, and we had to kind of basically take a lot of stuff out because it was getting hectic, and it wasn't very pleasant to watch. So and we just had to stop at one stage and kind of go, right, just like start taking stuff, cleaning out and kind of picking out bits, so like we can kind of, it can seem a bit more naturally flowing, and stop trying to manically cram every bit of history in. So kind of I suppose that's I don't know if that's a tip or information for people, or
it's short, obviously. So if you just, yeah, it's just a nod to a time in history or just a little brief introduction. And then people, you know, especially it being in a museum as well, you know, then people have to, hopefully it will give them enough interest to look into it more. I suppose is, yeah, because you can't put too much in.
Yeah, and I suppose just remember the age groups. It's like it's wide, so it's kind of jokes have to be land with
Yeah,
all age groups, or if not jokes, whatever it is you're saying has to be understandable to whoever who's going to
yeah,
be doing
and
it.
yeah, and language as well as age, because if the museum has people coming from all over the world, yeah, maybe focus on visual jokes as well. Or not that it has to be jokes, but just you can tell the story visually, so people, if they don't speak English or whatever, can get it as well.
I suppose the big thing is get the character of Dublin in, kind
Yeah.
of trying, because there's a character to Dublin, and like if you kind of say I'm going to do it in this style, and like certain styles of filmmaking have a very, you know, they look like they're from a place, or you know, but so let Dublin be kind of, I suppose, like, and that's why we kind of like sense of humor, things like that, kind of try to get those things across, because you know, Russians have a style of filmmaking. If you kind of try to make something like that kind of thing, it might not fit, or maybe it would. I don't know.
Are we rambling?
Yeah, that's rambling. That's top class rambling there.
But no, I think you are. I would absolutely agree that I think Dublin as a city has such a strong identity, and I think one of the opportunities that we have is to see how different filmmakers interpret that identity. And I think you know, you keep touching on this idea of humor, and I think now more than ever, in the kind of very strange world that is 2020, I think we need a bit of humor. I think that
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
the
last thing I would want to watch is something about a pandemic or whatever.
That's such a boring pandemic as well.
I know,
It's not even an exciting one. The sky's not burning. We're all just inside.
Yeah, we're just in a dud one.
Yeah. Netflix and banana bread. Yeah. But and then so talk to me about you know, a very bizarre question to ask, but talk to me about the process of dealing with the museum and the port, and how you found this as an experience overall.
Yeah, well, I thought it was really good in comparison to other things we've done. We just felt like we had like total creative freedom, and they really trusted in us and had faith in us to just go and make the thing. So yeah, in comparison to other funding schemes, that was really good. And we weren't really expecting to just be let loose at it. So that was really good.
But I think we started off like we were in agreement as to what we were kind of the direction that we were going.
Yeah.
Like in all the conversations we had similar interests, even like in the ideas that we were doing. So I think we were both on the same page. So then we were just actually completely left alone to our own devices. We had like some false starts even in ourselves, just questioning ourselves in the way we were going about it. And then we had to kind of reevaluate what we were doing and stuff. But like that was all done amongst ourselves. That was
yeah, but it was really helpful as well, just having access to the port and the archive that they have. And Larry joining the port's really good because he's just like a wealth of information on history. So that was really helpful. And then in the museum as well, because Trevor had all those oh God, I've forgotten his name now.
Yeah, lovely Prince.
John.
Malton, yes, the Malton, yes.
But yeah, that was really helpful as well.
Great,
yeah, and just for feedback as well. Actually, every time we spoke to yourselves, it was always constructive and kind of it was heading in a direction, you know, and just kind of making it better. You know, it wasn't. Yeah, it was just like a nice process all around, I think.
Great. I think we had been entirely new to the experience of filmmaking. So I must say that you did collectively make it a very pleasant and, you know, successful, positive first experience. I know I speak on behalf of the museum and the port when I say that. So, you know, clearly, thank you. You know, the plan was that the Chancellor's Guide to Dublin, the film, was going to end up this year on display in the Little Museum, and obviously as we've alluded to, this year has taken on a life of its own. So kind of in the months since we've put the film working with RTE, it's now up for view on the RTE player, and it will find its way into the little museum when in due course, as the pandemic eases. I wonder, just reflecting on the film overall, do you have any kind of final thoughts or observations about it as an experience?
I know when we first person we showed it to was one of Aoife's friends, and I was surprised at how much she laughed at it. Because when you've been staring at animation for a while, you kind of you forget if it even is working or doing its job. So sometimes you have to get people in.
Yeah.
And I can remember when Aoife's friend came in and we showed it to her, and she laughed quite a lot. I was like, oh, it's working, because I've just been staring at this for, I've just been like animating little things and doing stuff like that. You kind of forget if the overall structure is working. And
yeah.
But
yeah, it's great that it's getting good feedback as well.
Yeah, the first people I showed it to get feedback were my 3 and 5-year-old niece and nephew, and the second people I showed it to were our board of directors at a board meeting, and both collectives laughed, and it was quite a lovely moment.
Okay.
It was lovely to see that it did engage such a kind of a widely varied audience. It is.
It's such a relief as well. You're just like, please laugh, please laugh.
Well, I think you've definitely succeeded at making people laugh through the film being up on the RTE player in the last couple of months. And I know from the museum's perspective, we really appreciate that has happened. So yeah, it's exciting that we're launching the competition again, and it'll be interesting to see the applications that come through and what the second port short looks like. But we'll, I guess, between now and then, we'll continue working together on the Princess Guide and trying to build it out to a larger audience and to get people to see it. And I guess really just from me, all I can say is thank you so much for what you've done with the museum and with the Dublin Port. We've been thrilled with the process, and really so delighted that you guys created what you did. So thank you.
Oh, no worries.
Thanks very much. It's great working with you as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks a million. It was great.